Hey guys, Nick60 here, coming to you with another thing with For Honor. This time it is our female knights realistic. The reason I'm focusing on knights is because I'm not a professional historian and do not have access to or know where to find large caches of historical information. So I'm not even going to try with Vikings and Samurai because I just don't know, and I'm not going to try to talk about something that I don't have any knowledge about. So, yeah, when it comes to the female knights, I know a little bit. And that is to say that, yeah, there is in fact some basis in truth when it comes to female knights as they are portrayed in For Honor. Now, it's hard to get down into some very specific yeses and nos, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is my own shortcoming of, again, not having access to everything and knowing where to look for everything, but the other is, well, we'll get to, but it has to do with what information would be available anyways. Now, there were, historically, female knights and female soldiers. During the medieval ages, and even before, it was really, really difficult to completely bar military service. So, if a woman wanted to pick up a weapon and armor and go fight, it's not like she had to go and pass through 6 weeks basic training or 8 weeks or however long various militaries have for basic training and inspections. She wouldn't have to worry about that. She'd just have to show up and collect her bounty. So, usually posing as men, but not always. Not always. Depending on the society or the situation, people might not care, or at the very least not be willing to outright challenge her presence. Yeah, you can get a situation where women were armed and fighting. And that one situation that happened was, let me make sure I get the names right as best as I can, was the Siege of Tortosa, which is in Catalonia or Spain. Most of the men were off fighting a war in a crusade at this point in time, but this city then became under siege. So the women of the town put on men's clothing and whatever armor was available and armed themselves and successfully defended the town. And in response to this, the women who defended the town were all knighted. They were knighted by, trying to make sure I get names right, it's so insanely bad. Ramon Berenguer the Fourth, who was the Count of Barcelona. Wait, no, I think I got that mixed up. No, he was the one leading the men out. I'm sorry, I misread that. But, well, he was the one leading the men out in the crusade, but when he came back, he then knighted him. Okay, I was right the first time. Sorry about that. My notes are a little mismatched. Anyways, so he just knighted them, which came with, you know, it wasn't just, oh, you're a knight. No, it's, you are now members of Order of the Hatchet, which, when he bestowed it, it was only on the women. So, all of a sudden, there's this order of women knights, and they had privileges. This is during a time when women really couldn't inherit property. They could. These women could. It was still limited, but the fact is that they could actually inherit stuff. They were exempt from all taxes, and they actually had precedence when it came to, quote, public assemblies of the town, end quote, which, as I understand it, basically means that when it came to problems or something that the whole town could have a say in or whatever, their voices actually carried more weight than the average man, which during the 1100s, that's huge. And that's not the only case of women being knighted, but that is the one specific case that I can point to with full assurity. And so there are cases. We now have cases of women warriors, and we have cases of women knights, and we have cases of women warriors who became knights. And so then the question is, what about betrayal specifically in For Honor with heavy plate and chain, where most likely it was a bit more mix and match during that particular siege, because they were just picking up what was available. It could very well be plate and chain, but whether or not they owned it is another story, which comes into what a lot of knights really were. But yeah, we have obviously the case that I just listed of them being knighted, but a lot of knights, especially during the beginning, but it stayed for a while, were not the knight in shining armor and going out and protecting the countryside on their own. A lot of knights were basically mercenaries who either had, well, not either had, but nearly all of them were, that were considered, quote, knights, as we would see them, served a lord or a king, whatever, who paid for their equipment. If a lord or a king decided to have a woman in their service, if a woman comes to them and is able to convince them that she is a competent fighter and worthy of, basically being paid to kill people on that lord's order, then it's entirely possible and believable that that lord would say, alright, pick your armor and weapons, whatever, here's your bag of gold, you fight where I tell you to fight now. And that's not to say that that's what all knights were, but that was really much more common than you would think at first. And so, just in general, not necessarily towards women, just in general, more knights were like that than most people would believe. Or at least is portrayed, I guess is the better way to put it. So, it's believable to have women in plate and chain that are sponsored by nobles. Or, since we don't know for sure with the portrayal of For Honor yet, the women themselves could have bought the armor. A sufficiently capable mercenary, or the daughter of a merchant, or even a noblewoman could very easily, and did in history, simply pay for their own equipment. They might not be a knight in terms of having a specific name, but seeing them on the battlefield, you would assume that they're a knight, because they'd be having the heavy armor and the good weapons, and if they properly trained themselves, would just be plowing their way through the battlefield. And it'd be really hard to tell. And the way the knights are portrayed in For Honor, we don't know for sure that they are of the, quote, noble, bow your knee, sort, whole ceremony, you are now a knight of the order of X or whatever. They are knights in function, at least from what I've seen. And they are knights in function in that they are the heavy troopers who lead the fight, who engage the heavy troopers on the other side. And while this wasn't common in history, it was also not something that outright didn't happen. Though, admittedly, the proper term would probably be something closer to women soldiers. It's really, really difficult to tell, at least from my research, for sure, because there isn't a whole lot of specifics that I can find in that regard. I can certainly find evidence of the possibilities and of somewhat more rumored or stories of, but can't be substantiated because we're talking 1,000+ years ago. Its documents disappear, some or aren't written correctly, or honestly, they just weren't written. Period. And I can explain away, well, not explain away, but explain sort of some of why that isn't readily available, in that while back then it might not be something that would be condemned, it would probably be something that wouldn't be encouraged. So it would not likely be the sort of thing that would inspire large epics and stories and legends like the way some of the other knights in shining armor have on the male side of things, because yeah, it's great that this woman came into town and saved us and things, but it's also a little weird because this is 1102 and we're not really used to seeing women fighting all the time. So, yeah. Is it realistic? Maybe. Certainly the numbers of women to male knights in the game is not going to be realistic, because I find it unlikely that there are going to be enough male fighters to represent the disproportionate numbers. Uh, is it believable? I believe so, yes. And again, I'm not a military historian who knows every little detail about every little thing about knighthood in Europe and women soldiers and stuff, but as I am interpreting how the game portrays it, based on what knowledge I do have of history, yes, it is believable to see a woman in armor, proper armor, with a proper weapon on a medieval battlefield. Unlikely, but believable and possible. So that is, I guess, the wrap up. That yes and no at the same time. The odds of her being a knight, low. Odds of her being, for all intents and purposes, in terms of battlefield role, knight, much higher. If you see her, of course. So, yeah. I hope that I have given a lot of people something to think about. I'm sure that someone will come out with a much more heavily researched video to either say why I'm wrong or what I missed or whatever, be it intentionally or not. But I just felt like adding in my half cent. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate you listening to my ramble for the past 12-ish minutes. Nick60 signing off. Please like, comment, subscribe, discuss. Have a good one all.